Some love stories don't begin with eyes meeting, but with a missed flight. Some people walk into our lives not because of plans, but because fate decided to delay them by a few minutes. And in what seemed like meaningless hours between two flights, two strangers lived a full 24 hours. With no names, no pasts, no promises for tomorrow. But sometimes, it's that very day with no promises that teaches us what it means to love enough to stay. Have you ever missed something, only to realize it was the one thing you couldn't afford to lose? Atlanta, an early spring morning. The damp chill of a passing rain still clung to the glass panels of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Passengers rushed by, dragging their suitcases in endless waves. In the middle of that sea of people, Emily Sanders, her dark brown hair tied hastily, heels soaked from the rain, and a small silver suitcase in tow, was running down a long hallway as if her heartbeat was racing the clock. Her watch flashed, 8:17 a.m. Her breath came fast, her chest pounding like every second was slipping away. Her flight to New York, where she was scheduled to present before the biggest sponsorship board of her young interior design career, was set to depart at 8:30 a.m. And with every hurried step echoing against the cold tile, her hope felt as fragile as a sheet of paper caught in the wind. But then the voice of the check-in clerk rang out, regretful yet firm. "I'm sorry, boarding is closed." Emily froze. She stood there soaked from the rain chest, heaving lips trembling. The ticket and passport in her hands suddenly felt useless. Her father's words from the day he handed her this opportunity replayed like an old recording. "You're our last hope to save the studio." "No, not like this," she whispered. The next flight to New York wouldn't leave until 8:20 a.m. the following morning, which meant she was stuck here for 24 hours. And it could mean losing everything. Losing the project, losing their trust, losing the dream her father had spent his life building. Emily dragged herself toward the waiting area. The hallway stretched endlessly. The loudspeaker echoed above the smell of coffee from a nearby Starbucks, only tightening the knot inside her. She collapsed onto a plastic chair head, buried in her hands. Her shoulders hunched not from the cold anymore, but from helplessness. Then a voice came from beside her, low, warm, with a hint of playful teasing. "Missed your flight." Emily startled and looked up. A man sat a few seats away, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. He wore a white shirt sleeves, rolled up tie, loosened. His eyes were steel gray, sharp but not cold. His face carried a calm maturity that made his age difficult to guess. She nodded, eyes red. "Yeah, 5 minutes late." The man smiled faintly, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Maybe it's fate." Emily frowned. "Fate." He shrugged, sipping his coffee. "Maybe the universe wanted to pull you out of the race just long enough to make you look to your right." She instinctively turned her head toward him, and then let out a laugh, unsure if it was because of his silly remark or because she had actually done it. "My fate is probably a string of warning emails about getting fired." He chuckled. "At least fate has a sense of humor." Emily sighed, gaze drifting toward the runway, where planes lined up under soft morning light. "There's nothing funny about this," she muttered. He was silent for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "I missed my flight to New York this morning, too." She turned sharply. "You did? Maybe there's a club for people who miss flights without realizing their lives are about to change," he said, eyes distant as though recalling something deeply personal. Emily smiled faintly. For the first time in this awful morning, her lips curved upward. "So, what are you planning to do with 24 hours stuck here?" The man thought for a moment, then looked at her with a half-serious, half-playful smile. "I propose a pact." "A pact." He leaned in slightly, his voice like a whisper. "No names, no past, no future talk, only the present, 24 hours. Deal." Emily studied him carefully, wondering if he was some eccentric stranger. But deep down, in the part of her that always followed reason, always showed up on time, always carried her father's burdens, something longed to break free just this once. She tightened her grip on her bag-strap lips, lifting in a half-smile. "Only 24 hours." He extended his hand. "Honor promise." She shook it. His grip was firm, unexpectedly warm. He tilted his head. "Nice to meet you, Miss Rain Delay." Emily laughed. "Then I'll call you Mr. Gate Closed." They laughed together, and in that small moment, the storm inside her went quiet. Neither of them knew it yet. At the very same moment, the boarding gate closed another door. The door to their hearts quietly opened. The coffee in their hands was still warm. The waiting area had begun to thin out. Most passengers had boarded or moved on with their journeys. Emily and Mr. Gate Closed remained. Two strangers, two suitcases side by side, and a strange agreement hovering between them. "So, what do we do now?" she asked, tilting her head part, skeptical part, curious. He glanced at his watch. The minute hand had just touched 8:30. "We've got exactly 24 hours. And the rule is to live entirely in the present." Emily smiled faintly. "No names, no past, no future. I still can't believe I agreed to this." "That's the beauty of fate," he winked. "It doesn't need you to believe, just to step along." For the first time in days, she laughed with her whole heart. Then he stood extending his hand. "Breakfast, Miss Rain Delay." They found a small diner tucked in the corner of the terminal. The air smelled of eggs and toast. Emily ordered strawberry pancakes with orange juice. He chose a bacon burger and black coffee. She burst out laughing when he fumbled with a ketchup packet splattering red on his crisp white sleeve. "I thought people in white shirts were supposed to stick with coffee, not ketchup." He raised a brow. "Exactly. That's why I'm breaking the rule." "Seems like you're an expert at breaking rules," she teased. "No, just this time I decided to do it differently." His voice softened, carrying something far deeper than a joke. Emily went quiet, swirling her glass of juice. She didn't know why, but those words. "This time, I decided to do it differently," touched something inside her. After breakfast, they wandered the airport like travelers with no destination. They passed through a temporary art exhibit, featuring oil paintings on missed journeys. Emily paused at one canvas, showing a woman standing in an empty train station, her hands empty. "She's not carrying luggage," Emily observed. "Maybe she put it down to chase what she believes in," he replied. She turned to him. His eyes were on the painting, but she couldn't shake the feeling that his answer was about something else entirely. They stopped at the game arcade where a few kids were racing virtual cars. Emily's eyes lit up at the sight of a mini basketball hoop. "Want to try?" he asked. "Afraid I'll beat you," she teased, raising a brow. "That's exactly what I'm hoping for." He rolled up his sleeves. His first shot clanged off the rim. The second bounced off the side. He grimaced. Emily tilted her head, arms folded, grinning wide. Her turn, first shot, swish, second shot, in again. He clapped as though he were cheering for the national team. "Miss Rain Delay, I officially surrender," he declared solemnly as the screen flashed. "Winner, call me Miss Clutch from now on." She laughed, cheeks flushed pink. Next came the claw machine. He failed twice in a row. Emily, on her first try, snagged a tiny white kitten, plush with a pink bow. She handed it to him, her tone mock serious. "Consolation prize, for the brave who play terribly." He accepted it as if it were treasure. "I'll keep this as a souvenir, but I'll reclaim my honor in the next game." Her laughter rang bright. "You mean that photo booth over there?" The booth stood humbly in a corner, its red curtain frayed, a neon sign flickering above. They squeezed inside shoulders, brushing in the cramped space. "First photo, serious, polite. Second?" Emily stuck her tongue out, catching him off guard. "Third?" He made a goofy face, and she doubled over, laughing. "Fourth?" Emily lowered her head, leaving only her smiling eyes visible. He tilted toward her as though trying to etch that very moment into memory. The machine spit out 2 strips of photos. Emily folded one set and tucked it into her wallet. The other she handed to him. "This is proof that we lived a day without asking what's next. And without needing to know who we are," he whispered, taking it. They sat on a bench near the atrium, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. The clock read 11:17 a.m. Only 3 hours had passed, yet in their eyes was a familiarity that felt like they had already shared a whole summer. Emily looked at him. "You really won't tell me your name?" He shook his head, smiling gently. "Not today, because today doesn't need a name, only presence." She nodded slowly, said nothing more, but in her heart something new and fragile had begun to grow. The hours after lunch at an airport are usually dull, but for Emily and the mysterious man she had nicknamed Mr. Gate Closed, everything felt the complete opposite. After leaving the photo booth, they wandered through souvenir shops, laughing uncontrollably at oversized tourist hats and flip-flops printed with state maps. At one point, They almost got scolded by security for debating too loudly whether Georgia was more famous for peaches or the Falcons. Then they stumbled upon the massage chairs, huge glossy black things that looked like mechanical beasts waiting for prey. Emily eyed them skeptically. They look like the villain's throne in a superhero movie, she remarked. And just as terrifying, he replied, but today is the day to try things we've never done before. He chose the chair on the right. She took the one on the left. The moment he pressed the button, the chair growled to life, clamping down on his shoulders and back like an interrogation machine. Good Lord. This isn't massage, it's torture, he yelped, eyes bulging. Emily laughed so hard tears rolled down her cheeks. She quickly hit the stop button, rescuing him from the modern punishment. When the chair finally released him, he slumped forward as though he had just survived a storm. His tie was crooked, his hair a mess, but his grin radiant. This is the first time I've ever been bullied by a chair, he said. At least it cured your chronic seriousness, she teased. He tilted his head toward her. Thank you, Dr. Clutch, he said with a playful nod to the nickname she had earned at the basketball game. Emily smiled. For the first time in weeks, she felt light, as if she had shed something unbearably heavy. Right next door was the arcade, a place she never thought she would step into. LED lights flashed, electronic music blared, bells rang each time someone scored. He pulled her toward a boxing machine. Want to blow off some steam, he asked. For what? For deadlines, for bosses, for flights that never leave on time. Emily grinned, slipped on the gloves like a boxer. First punch, 267 points. Second, 299. On the third, she smashed past 320. She let out a shout of victory. He whistled. You could run a security company any day. Only if the salary is paid in chocolate, she shot back. They moved on to bumper cars, then to air hockey. That's when the real battle began. He led the score most of the game. But in the final 10 seconds, Emily staged a comeback, slamming the puck into his goal with the precision of a penalty kick. You cheated, he protested, feigning outrage. You just learned the value of persistence, she said, with a triumphant shrug. You're winning everything today, he murmured, looking straight into her bright eyes. And not just referring to the games. Emily felt her cheeks grow warm. After more than an hour of laughter and shouts, they left the arcade each with an ice cream cone in hand. They sat on a bench near a wide window overlooking the runway, sinking into silence. Not awkward, but peaceful. The sky was deepening into a darker shade of blue. Contrails stretched like chalk-written lines across a vast canvas. Do you ever think, Emily asked softly, what if we hadn't missed our flights this morning? Then I'd probably be sitting in a boardroom in Midtown, he replied, and you'd be trembling before your presentation in New York. And instead, she twirled her strawberry cone. We're here eating ice cream at an airport after boxing machines and murderous massage chairs. Sounds like the headline of a parallel universe news story. He laughed. Emily gazed at him, her expression softening. That universe. I didn't expect to like it so much. He didn't answer, but the look they shared was more than enough. No need to know what tomorrow would bring. No need to name the feeling. The afternoon sun slanted through thick glass painting, everything with a golden hue. Airports, usually seen as lifeless transitory spaces, had become a stage for something extraordinary. A place where two nameless people carrying burdens and responsibilities had found a pocket of air to breathe, a brief sanctuary amid the rush of lives passing by. So, what's next in this crazy plan? Emily asked, giving him a sidelong glance. He pointed toward a small store with a flashing sign, photo booth, make a memory. Leave a mark, of course. He grinned. Not a memory, but a present moment lived, she corrected softly as though sealing a truth bigger than both of them. Night settled over the airport like a thin blanket. The ceiling lights dimmed, the noise softened. Announcements grew fewer, replaced by the slow roll of suitcase wheels. Over tile, the clack of keyboards in a far-off corner, and the occasional muffled yawn of weary travelers. Emily and her nameless companion still hadn't left. They had wandered through almost every section. The food court, gift shops, game, corners, even the bookstore with its forgotten discount novels. They hadn't bought a thing, but they had carried away so much more laughter, glances, rare moments of silence. Now they sat together in the overnight lounge, longer seats, softer lighting, a broad glass wall opening onto the sleeping runway. Outside, amber floodlights washed over silent airplanes, huge steel birds resting like gentle giants. Emily pulled a thin scarf over her shoulders, shivered slightly. She leaned back, eyes fluttering. Today was such a strange day, she murmured. He nodded softly. Strange, but not bad. She chuckled faintly. Yeah, not bad. I don't think I've ever felt this free. Because today you weren't anyone, he said quietly. Not somebody's daughter, not someone carrying the weight of expectations. Just a girl who missed her flight. She didn't answer. Her eyes remained closed, but a faint smile lingered. Minutes later, her head tilted, resting lightly against the chair's edge. Her breathing evened out. Her brown hair spilled like a river down her shoulder. She had fallen asleep. He turned, watching her silently. Under the mellow yellow glow, her face looked untroubled. All the creases of deadlines, of pressure, of worry, had vanished. What remained was a young woman who, for the first time in so long, had allowed herself peace. He didn't speak, didn't touch her. He only removed his jacket, unfolding it carefully, and laid it over her shoulders like an unspoken promise. Then he turned away, eyes drifting out to the runway. A baggage cart rolled slowly across its green lights, trailing behind like falling stars. In that time, he didn't think about contracts. Not about numbers flashing on stock tickers, unread emails, or stacks of financial reports. He didn't picture Zoom calls waiting, or the letter CEO beside his name. All of it, the armor he had worn for years, suddenly felt distant, unnecessary, as if someone had gently stripped it away, leaving him there with bare hands, real breath, and a jacket draped over the shoulders of a stranger. He didn't need to prove anything, didn't need admiration, didn't need to control the story. He just sat beside her, not speaking, not strategizing, not manipulating the moment, just being there. He glanced at her again. She slept in that half-deep, half-light way, relaxed, but still vulnerable. One of her hands rested loosely on his jacket, as if unconsciously holding on to something safe. Her messy brown hair, the pale blush of her cheeks, her steady breaths. There was no makeup, no rehearsed smile, no curated pose. And somehow, that made her breathtaking. How long has it been since I sat beside someone and just sat? The question didn't come like a loud bell, but like a whisper, like a sigh his heart had been holding back for years. He remembered business trips, first-class flights, luxury hotels, glass-walled boardrooms, always surrounded by people, assistants, partners, advisors, but never truly with anyone. Presence, the simplest thing, had become the rarest. And now, it was here, unguarded, undesigned, a gift no one asked for, yet one everyone longed to receive. Nearly an hour passed. Outside the night was still dark, but no longer deep black. The horizon was turning the faintest shade of gray. Time hadn't flown because it was wasted. It had slipped by because they were living each minute fully, without worry, without distraction. So much so, it was as if even time itself felt honored. That's why dawn was already creeping in too soon. Yet just in time. She stirred, didn't sit up, just tilted her head, blinking slowly under the soft yellow glow. For a moment, she looked dazed, as if wondering whether it had all been a dream. Then she noticed the jacket, still on her shoulders, still carrying the faint scent of wood and mint, a scent that made her want to trust without question. This is, she whispered, voice still heavy with sleep. He tilted his head, smiling gently. No one brought you a blanket. So I thought I'd be the first. She tugged the jacket tighter around herself, cheeks flushing, not from the cold. Thank you, Mr. Special Care. He raised a brow. That's too long a name. Remember our pact, she laughed softly. Right. No names, no past, no future, only now. She turned toward the window. The sky was still dark, but a streak of gray at the horizon hinted at something coming. Dawn or hope. Do you often wake in the middle of the night? He asked, voice low. She nodded, eyes fixed outward. All the time. My mind replays everything undone. Emails unanswered, mistakes uncorrected, people I let down, and the things I forgot to forgive myself for. He stayed silent. And tonight, he asked gently. She turned to him. In her gaze there was no mask, no pretense of being fine, only softness, raw and fragile. There's only one thing left I haven't done. What's that? She yawned lightly, the kind that reset the body. Then she leaned back, eyes closing, a childlike smile touching her lips, as she settled into the seat. Trust. Moments later, she drifted back to sleep. But this time, it wasn't a lonely sleep. Not because someone sat beside her, but because that someone asked for nothing. Didn't pry, didn't demand, didn't force her to share. He remained there, eyes half closed. No longer a CEO, no longer a man straining to prove himself. Just a man sitting beside a woman, in silence, in darkness, slowly giving way to light, breathing together. Between them, there were no names, no expectations. Only a jacket laid over her shoulders, a streak of gray brightening beyond the glass, and something fragile, yet true, something that might just be a beginning. Outside, the horizon was stirring. From a faint gray smudge, the first light of dawn seeped through the airport's thick glass. Pale orange brushed with hints of rose spread across the sky, as if someone had softly stroked a paintbrush over the canvas of night, awakening the world from its slumber. Emily's eyes fluttered open again, but this time, she didn't panic about oversleeping. She didn't jolt awake as if chasing something urgent. Instead, she sat up slowly, tucking her hair back and adjusting the jacket still resting across her shoulders. That jacket was no longer just fabric. It had become a sign of presence, a quiet kindness that asked for no recognition. "Good morning," he said, approaching with 2 paper cups in hand. On one lid, written in marker, was a single word: mint. Emily chuckled. No more coffee, mint tea, gentler, and it won't make your heart race with anxiety. She accepted the cup, warmth seeping into her palms. Breathing in the minty aroma calmed the last threads of tension knotted inside her. "You stayed up all night?" she asked. "Not exactly. I closed my eyes for a bit. But when I opened them, you were still there." She paused, her gaze drifting out the window, where dawn was spreading like a silent symphony across the sky. They stood and wheeled their bags toward the front row of seats facing the glass. The perfect place to watch the sunrise. The terminal was hushed. Only the soft rumble of a luggage cart and the faint, faraway hum of announcements floated through the air, sounding like echoes from another world. They sat side by side. Neither spoke. Before them, planes lined up silently, their silver bodies glowing as the first light of day kissed them awake. One of those planes would carry them away. Maybe on the same flight, maybe not. But for now, neither wanted to think about leaving. "Do you like sunrises?" he asked, voice low, blending with the steam of mint tea. Not before she answered, still watching the horizon. Sunrises always meant responsibility, work, emails, deadlines. To me, they weren't beginnings, just alarms. And today, she thought for a moment, then said, "Today." It feels like the light is asking me, "Are you ready?" instead of, "Did you finish?" His eyes lingered on her, ready for what he asked softly. Emily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she set her cup down, rose, and walked toward the glass. She pressed her palm lightly against the cold pane. Outside, the sunlight poured in, making her fingers glisten like crystal. He came to stand beside her, not touching, just close enough. A distance that didn't intrude, but close enough that their hands almost found each other. When her fingers shifted slightly, his hand tilted, brushing alongside hers. Not holding, not grasping, just touching edges. Like 2 streams barely grazing, not yet merging. "Do you ever wonder?" Her voice floated, delicate as the morning breeze. "In another version of the world, maybe we never missed our flights. And then what? Then I board as planned. You do too. No egg sandwiches, no angry massage chairs, no goofy photo booth strips. And no mint tea." She smiled. "None of this." He nodded. "And no you. Standing here seeing the world as if it's kinder than you ever thought it could be." Her eyes lifted to him, and in that gaze was something like gratitude, not to him alone, but to fate itself, for delaying her flight, for bringing her here, for bringing him. An elderly couple shuffled past, pulling a suitcase between them. Their steps were slow, but their hands never let go of each other. The man glanced at his wife gently, adjusting her scarf. A small gesture, but the look in his eyes, tender, grateful, steady, was the kind of devotion one waits a lifetime to give. Emily watched them, her voice barely audible. "Do you believe in feelings without names?" "I'm living inside one right now," he answered. "Not knowing names, not knowing pasts, not needing futures, yet it feels real. Because sometimes presence is enough." She turned to him, meeting his eyes in the clear light of morning. No dim glow to hide behind now, no shadows to soften truths. The dawn revealed everything. Old scars, new hopes. He was a man with sharp lines in his features, yet in that moment the edges softened, leaving only eyes that seemed as fragile as they were steady, as though he too was learning to allow himself to trust. Then he asked softly, "If we met again, after these 24 hours, not at an airport, not under a pact, just two people in the real world, would you take the bet?" Emily's eyes dropped to their almost touching hands. Her fingers trembled, because his question wasn't light. It was the first crack in the wall they had built together, no future talk. "What kind of bet?" she whispered. "On this feeling, on something without explanations, without guarantees, but that still makes you want to come back." She stayed silent for a long time. Outside, the sun rose fully above the terminal roof. Golden light spilled through the glass, washing the floor. A family strolled by, a mother tugging her daughter's hand, a father pulling a suitcase, their laughter threading through the air. Emily drew in a deep breath. "Yesterday I missed a flight, but it brought me to a place with no clear destination." She turned to him, her eyes steady, full of trust. "And maybe that's exactly where I'm meant to begin." He smiled, not loudly, not grand, but real. And then naturally, as if drawn by the rhythm of their shared breath, they leaned in. The kiss wasn't rushed, not dramatic, not like in the movies. It was as simple as sunlight touching a window pane, as gentle as mint still lingering on their lips, and as deep as the unnamed thing that neither dared to speak aloud, yet was already seeping into their hearts. The New York sky that afternoon was a different shade of gray, colder, sharper, nothing like the soft rose dawn Emily had touched at the airport less than 12 hours earlier. Gone was the warmth of golden light spilling across glass. Now, only the stark white glare of Midtown's conference hotel towers reflected from endless panes of glass greeted her. Emily hurried across the vast lobby, clutching her leather portfolio against her chest. Inside were the design plans her father had entrusted to her, the last hope to secure the contract that could save Sanders & Co., their family's three-generation interior design firm. Each step felt heavy, burdened with not only deadlines and fear, but something else she couldn't yet name, something that still lingered, the taste of mint on her lips, the memory of a hand brushing hers as dawn broke. But she didn't know yet that within hours her entire world would unravel. The meeting was on the 33rd floor. Glass walls framed a sweeping view of Manhattan. Sunlight pierced the room, casting long slashes of brilliance across the polished conference table. One by one, the partners and stakeholders took their seats, voices solemn, precise. Emily sat beside her father, whose face had grown thinner, wearier, after months of fighting to keep the company afloat. He didn't speak, but when he placed his hand gently over her wrist, she understood his message. "You can do this." She nodded, gripping her portfolio tighter. Now was the time to fight. For the firm. For his legacy. The doors opened. Emily lifted her head and froze as if doused in ice water. The man who walked in was him. No longer in a rolled-up white shirt, sipping coffee, grinning over claw machines. No longer the man who had draped a jacket over her shoulders or kissed her gently at sunrise. Now he was immaculate in a black suit, tie perfectly knotted eyes hard and resolute. The man she had shared 24 hours of freedom with stood before her as someone entirely different. In one heartbeat, he was the stranger she'd trusted. In the next, he was the CEO leading the team, negotiating to take over her father's company. Her pulse faltered. She clutched her papers as though they were the only thing holding her together. When his eyes found hers, he hesitated. For the first time, a crack split his polished composure. But then he straightened, inclining his head toward the room. His voice rang clear, authoritative, the voice of a man who'd conquered boardrooms before. "Good afternoon. I'm Nathan Carter, representing Carter Group in this merger." The name hit Emily like a blow. Nathan, in 24 hours, she had never known it. She had called him Mr. Gate Closed, Miss Rain Delay, nothing else. And now, Nathan Carter, CEO, the man fighting to swallow Sanders & Co., whole. Her chest tightened. The jacket, the photo strips, the mint tea, the kiss. Had it all been a performance? The door opened again. A second man entered, Victor Hale, CEO of a rival firm infamous for sabotaging delicate deals. his smirk cut like a blade, and in his hands he carried a stack of newspapers. "Before we begin," Victor drawled, "I think everyone should see today's headlines." He tossed the papers onto the table. The front page screamed with a photo of Emily and Nathan, side by side in the airport lounge, cups of tea in hand, the sunrise behind them, painting a frame that looked almost like a wedding portrait. The headlines: CEO Nathan Carter's 24-hour romantic ploy, winning hearts and companies. Every head turned toward Emily. She felt stripped bare under hundreds of watching eyes. Even her father, sitting silently beside her, turned. His face wasn't angry, but in his eyes was something worse, quiet, unspeakable disappointment. Victor's smirk deepened. "Smart, Carter. 24 hours and you've got yourself a perfect love story headline. Not just winning the company, but the daughter too." Emily shot to her feet. Her chair clattered back, the sound slicing through the silence. Her eyes locked on him, the man she'd trusted without asking his name. "Was it true?" Her voice shook. "Did you plan this?" He opened his mouth, but she cut him off. The mint tea, the massage chair, the photo booth, were they just tools, part of your strategy? The room went silent. Nathan stepped forward, but her eyes had already hardened, locking shut like a door slammed against him. He stopped. For the first time in years, he had no words to persuade, no angle to control, no contract clause to lean on. Her voice cracked, trembling but resolute. "I placed a bet, and it turns out the game was rigged from the start." She turned, walking out of the conference room, her steps firm, but inside, something caved in. Not just the deal, not just her dignity, but her trust. Behind her, Nathan stood, frozen, the murmurs of the boardroom fading into meaningless noise. For the first time, his heart was no longer something he could control. He could negotiate with investors. He could strategize against rivals. But with her, he had no idea where to begin. Because for the first time in his life, what he feared losing wasn't written on any contract. New York wept for 3 straight days after that fateful meeting. In a small rented apartment in West Village, Emily sat by the rain-slick window, watching streetlights flicker against the glass. In her hands, she held a tiny leather wallet, opening and closing it over and over, a reflex she couldn't stop. Inside was the photo strip from the airport booth. 4 blurry frames, 4 moments of laughter. Memories refused to rest. They clung to her like the scent of mint on his jacket, tender, yet stabbing her heart each time she remembered. She shut down her social media. She didn't read the news. She ignored every call, until the 3rd afternoon when Amy, her best friend in the media world, knocked at her door. "You should come," Amy said without preamble. "He's about to hold a press conference, not to defend himself, to take off the armor." Emily looked up, startled. "Take off the armor." Amy's voice softened. "You need to see for yourself, not for the papers, not for anyone else, for your heart. You owe it that much." And so she found herself there, 3rd row off to the side, sunglasses shading her face, a long coat pulled tight. In front, the podium waited in the grand hall of Carter Group's headquarters. Banners read, "The truth behind the 24-hour airport story." Reporters filled every seat, cameras, flashing microphones bristling. Emily didn't know what she wanted, that he would lie to save his reputation, apologize just to soften her anger, or worse, pretend she hadn't mattered at all. Whatever it was, she needed to hear it from him. Not from headlines, not from whispers, from his own mouth. Then he appeared. No entourage, no PR manager, no forced smile, no typed script. Just Nathan, but not Nathan the CEO. Nathan from those 24 hours. Shoulders lowered, eyes steady, stripped of every mask. "Before anyone speaks for me," he began, his voice low, rough with exhaustion, but firm. "I want to tell it myself. Without spin, without filters." The room fell silent. 3 days ago, I met a woman at the airport," he said. "We both missed our flights. We didn't know each other's names. We didn't speak of the past. We didn't talk of the future. We made a strange pact just to live in the moment." He lifted his gaze straight into the cameras. "And in that moment, I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't Nathan Carter. I was just a man sitting beside a woman, learning to exist without titles, without power, without hidden agendas." Emily's throat tightened. Every word pressed against her ribs because he wasn't defending himself. He wasn't blaming anyone. He was simply telling the truth. Raw, unvarnished, Yes, later I found out she was representing the company in negotiations with us. Nathan continued, and no, I didn't stop the deal. Not because I wanted to deceive her, but because I didn't know how to hold both, a growing feeling and a responsibility I hadn't finished. He paused. His eyes searched the crowd. And then they found her. Emily didn't look away. Nathan stepped down from the podium. He walked into the aisle past startled reporters who parted instinctively as though sensing this was not a scene they were meant to interrupt. Emily, he said, her name spoken aloud for the first time before hundreds of flashing cameras. I know I don't deserve your trust right now. I know I can't demand it, but I can't stand by and let the world believe what we had was just some ploy. She gripped her coat pocket tighter, holding herself still. I didn't come here to negotiate, he went on. His voice shook, but not with fear, with urgency. I came because I lost the one thing that matters. Not the contract, not the shares, but the way you looked at me when you believed in me. The hall was frozen in silence. A reporter muttered under his breath, "Good God, this is a love confession, not a financial statement." Emily rose slowly, deliberately. Nathan's eyes followed her every step as she moved closer. But she stopped just short of him, not reaching, not collapsing into his arms, not crying, only standing with a look that asked the question the whole world was waiting for, truth or lie. "Can you stop the acquisition?" she asked. It wasn't an attack, it wasn't business. It was a test. Nathan was silent. Seconds stretched. Then he nodded. I will, then do it," she said firmly. He tilted his head. "But if I do, will you believe it's for you and not for anything else?" Emily didn't answer right away. The wound in her trust was still raw, but somewhere deep inside, something began to soften. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She only gave the smallest nod, then stepped past him, not holding his hand, not looking back. But just before reaching the door, she paused. "I don't know if we can start over," she said, her voice no longer trembling. "But if we do, let me be the one who chooses where it begins." And she walked out, leaving Nathan standing there, his heart pounding not with profit graphs or shareholder charts, but with the rhythm of a woman's footsteps. That night, under rain-slick streets and neon reflections, Nathan stood at his office window. On the desk lay a formal withdrawal of Carter Group's proposal to buy Sanders & Co. His own signature sealed it. Beyond the glass, the city hurried on. But within him, something new stirred, a different kind of life. Not the life of a CEO, but of a man who finally knew what it meant to fear losing what truly mattered. And this time, he vowed he wouldn't miss the flight again. Not every wound needs only time to heal. Some require courage to face head-on. After that explosive press conference, after his public vow to withdraw the deal, after her quiet nod, that gave nothing, but also gave everything, Emily and Nathan entered a quiet in-between. It wasn't love again. It wasn't quite a beginning either. It felt like standing before a door that had once slammed shut. Now both of them rested their hands on the handle, but hadn't yet dared to turn it. Emily returned to her father's modest office, the burden of anxiety eased now that Sanders & Co. was safe. She threw herself into work, more focused, more determined, but also more subdued. She no longer laughed as easily in meetings. She didn't hum to podcasts while sketching late at night. Something remained stuck inside her. Not anger, not heartbreak, but fear of believing again, and shattering again. As for Nathan, he didn't storm back into her life. No bouquets of roses, no long desperate messages. Instead, a single envelope arrived at her office. Inside a postcard, white, simple, a sketch of the New York skyline, a silver streak cutting across the violet sky. At the bottom, in his familiar, steady handwriting, "Not to remind you, but to remind myself, some things are never just coincidence." A week later, Emily picked up the phone, not to ask, "What are we?" but simply, "Are you free for afternoon tea?" Their first meeting after the storm wasn't dramatic. It was a tiny tea room in Brooklyn where trays of hand-baked cookies sat beside steaming pots of fresh mint tea. They sat across from each other. No talk of contracts. No mention of the scandal. Only stories, small, ordinary, yet deeply personal. She told him about the neighbor's dog that barked at 3 a.m. every night. About how she once fell into a rosebush trying to ride a bike at 8 years old. He told her how, during college, he nearly dropped out because he felt like he was living someone else's life. Their words were not confessions of love. but they were threads weaving a fabric stronger than apologies. Love did not return like a storm. It seeped back slowly like sunlight through a curtain in the morning, gentle, steady, unhurried. One evening, while reaching into her wallet for a business card, Emily dropped the photo strip from the airport booth. It fluttered to the floor. Nathan picked it up, his eyes catching on the third frame. His face scrunched in a goofy expression, her laughter spilling wide. "You kept this?" he asked, voice low. "Yeah," she admitted softly. "Because that was the moment you weren't performing." Nathan lifted his gaze. For the first time since everything, his eyes were clear, unguarded. "Do you know," he said quietly, "those 24 hours were the first time in my life I felt like I was breathing in rhythm with someone else." Emily's chest tightened. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away. After that day, they didn't talk every night. They didn't cling, they didn't rush. But every meeting brought them a step closer. Not toward an ending, but toward a beginning. One early summer afternoon, they returned to the place where it all started, the airport. Not to board flights, but to walk through the international terminal together, side by side. They stopped at the very row of seats where they had once sat, strangers with nicknames instead of names. The same Starbucks aroma lingered in the air, the same glass panes opening to the same runways. But they were no longer the same. In a small souvenir shop, Emily paused before a postcard. It showed two figures, a man and a woman, sitting side by side, each holding a teacup, gazing out at an empty airport. "This looks like us that day," she murmured. Nathan stepped closer, his voice dropping low, intimate. "No, that day, you weren't sitting this close." Emily turned, their eyes locked. Nathan leaned in, his words barely a whisper. "If you're late today, I'll still wait." She smiled, not hesitant, not afraid. She reached for his hand, not gripping hard, just enough for him to feel her choice. "And if I don't miss the flight, you'd better make sure you're sitting next to me." They left the airport without boarding a plane, because this journey needed no boarding gate, only trust pieced back together. And two people walking toward each other. Summer in Vermont always arrived like a gentle prelude, not loud, not rushed, but quietly in its own time. The leaves deepened into rich green daisies, blossomed under tender sunlight, and the air carried a faint trace of mint, a scent that for Emily no longer meant just tea. It meant beginnings. In a small garden behind a restored farmhouse, climbing vines covered the wooden gate. White chairs lined the petal-strewn path. There was no red carpet, no stage, no LED screens. Only familiar faces, warm eyes, and hearts that had witnessed a love once thought lost forever. Inside, Emily stood in a simple ivory gown. No extravagant lace, no sequined train. She held a bouquet of lavender and baby's breath, modest, but carrying the fragrance of freedom. Her father appeared beside her, his hand trembling as he placed it on hers. Today, he whispered, "You're not the heir to a company, not the one carrying all of my expectations." He paused, eyes damp. "Today, you only need to be a woman who knows whose side she wants to walk on." Emily smiled. "I know." And for the first time, she walked forward, not for duty, but for herself. Nathan waited beneath an arch of greenery, sunlight slanting gently through. He wore a light-colored suit. He was no longer the CEO of Carter Group, no longer the sharpest man in the boardroom. He was simply a man willing to surrender every victory as long as it meant never losing her again. When their eyes met beneath the canopy of leaves, memories flickered between them, the stubborn massage chair, the photo booth strip, the tiny plush cat, the mint tea, and that sunrise kiss. Once she thought that was their beginning. But now she knew this was... Their vows weren't long. They weren't rehearsed. Just truth spoken quietly. "I once lived by logic, but you taught me to trust what has no answers. I once lived to control everything, but you taught me to believe in the unpredictable." When the rings slipped onto their fingers, their hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from reverence. They knew how precious this was. Applause erupted around them. But in that instant, the world seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them. Nathan leaned close, whispering into her ear. "This time there's no flight to miss. Only us. On a journey for life." Emily rested her forehead against his. "And even if I come late, I know I'll still end up exactly where I'm meant to be." The reception unfolded on the lawn, under strings of lights hung between apple trees. No champagne towers. Just light wine, handmade cake, laughter. On each table, instead of printed cards, guests found a white postcard, the same kind they once held in an airport. In the corner of each card was a sketch of kitten ear and a coffee stain, silly symbols of their first day together. And across the sky of the card, a drawn streak like a contrail. No destination written, only the words. A flight with no name, only two travelers. No one waits at airports forever. But some meetings in airports, no matter how brief, no matter how unexpected, can become maps leading home. For Emily and Nathan, home wasn't an address on any street. Home was each other's eyes wherever they were. Sometimes great things don't begin with grand bells or clear signposts. They begin with a closed door, a missed flight, a spilled cup of coffee on a stranger's shirt, an empty chair in a crowded terminal chosen by no one else, except her and him, a silly remark, maybe it's fate, and a handshake with no names attached. They never needed to know where the future would lead, because those 24 hours had taught them one truth. As long as two hearts choose to stay seated side by side, not walking away, then even without an itinerary, there will always be a flight. Now when people ask Emily, what made you believe in him after everything? She only smiles. She doesn't explain with logic or plans. She remembers one moment, waking in the middle of the night, a jacket draped over her shoulders, his hand not claiming hers, only resting near enough to let her know she wasn't alone. Life will bring many flights, some delayed, some rerouted, some emergency landings. But for them, never again would there be a missed connection. Because from now on, every flight would be one they shared,